Since the dawn of civilization, humanity has not only fought battles for territories or tangible riches. The true war takes place on a much more subtle and devastating field, dominion over one's self. And there is a cruel irony in this equation that few dare to confront. Those who believe they possess absolute control over their financial choices are, frequently, the most enslaved by them. Think for a moment. You save money religiously. You cut expenses. You deny yourself small pleasures. You live under the cloak of financial self-control. And yet, wealth remains a distant mirage. Why? Because there is a fundamental difference between control and self-sabotage disguised as virtue. Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States and a philosopher of economic pragmatism, wrote in his almanac, "A penny saved is a penny earned." This maxim shaped generations. But Franklin also understood something that popular culture has distorted over the centuries. He was not preaching avarice or perpetual denial. He was talking about the strategic investment of emotional and financial capital. Seneca, the Roman Stoic, warned, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." Perpetual poverty, my friend, is not just a consequence of a lack of money. It is, more often than not, the result of misdirected self-control that paralyzes instead of liberates. Throughout this journey, we will not simply list financial mistakes. We will descend into the catacombs of behavioral psychology and economic philosophy to extract the 5 great illusions of self-control, those mental traps that turn your financial discipline into a prison of mediocrity. Each error I will reveal is not just an abstract concept, but a behavioral pattern rooted in centuries of social conditioning. Prepare yourself. The knowledge you are about to receive will confront beliefs you considered unquestionable virtues. And when we are finished, you will not see money, self-control, or financial success in the same way again. Error number 1, the tyranny of compulsive saving. Confusing frugality with fear. First error, you save not out of strategy, but out of existential terror. There is an abyssal difference between the man who saves resources to invest in future opportunities and the one who hoards pennies like a dragon hoarding gold. Not for purpose, but out of primitive panic. Behavioral psychology teaches us about something called the scarcity mindset, a phenomenon studied extensively by economists Sendil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir. When we live in a constant state of perceived scarcity, our prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for strategic thinking, is hijacked by primitive hypervigilance. The result? You develop what I call survival myopia. Every financial decision becomes binary. Spending is danger, saving is safety. But this dichotomous view completely ignores the dynamic nature of wealth creation. Wealth, my friend, is not built through perpetual denial. It is built through the intelligent allocation of scarce resources into opportunities that multiply value. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, that repressed part of the psyche that, the more it is denied, the more power it gains over our unconscious actions. When you repress every impulse to invest, every desire for growth, every opportunity that requires capital, you are not exercising self-control. You are feeding a financial shadow that will eventually explode into irrational decisions, or worse, a lifetime of unrealized potential. Let me tell you the story of a woman named Hetty Green, known in the late 19th century as the Witch of Wall Street. Hetty inherited a considerable fortune and, through astute investments, became one of the richest women in America. So far, a success story. But Hetty had a problem. She confused strategic frugality with a scarcity pathology. She lived in cheap apartments, ate cold oatmeal to avoid spending on heating, and wore ragged clothes. When her son Ned severely fractured his leg, she refused to pay for proper medical treatment, seeking free clinics disguised as a pauper. The consequence? The son's leg developed gangrene and had to be amputated. Hetty Green died in 1916 with a fortune estimated at $100 million, equivalent to over $2 billion today. But she died alone, bitter, and left a mutilated son as her legacy. She had all the money in the world, but remained poor in everything that truly matters. Why? because her financial self-control was, in fact, pathology dressed as virtue. Today, I see this same syndrome in thousands of people. The professional who never invests in education because it's too expensive, remaining stagnant in a mediocre career for decades. The entrepreneur who doesn't hire qualified help because they need to save money, condemning their business to slow growth and eventual failure by exhaustion. Compulsive saving creates a cruel paradox. The more you save out of fear, the fewer real growth opportunities you pursue. Your bank account may grow slowly, but your future earning potential atrophies. You are saving your way into mediocrity. First step, diagnose the difference. Ask yourself, am I saving for something specific that will expand my ability to generate value, or am I saving against an undefined fear of future catastrophe? Second, implement the mandatory investment rule. Before saving, allocate a fixed percentage of your income, start with 10%, exclusively for investments in your growth. Education, tools, networking, health, skills. This money is not spent, it is planted. Save the rest with a clear conscience, knowing you have already nourished the seeds of your future growth. Error number 2. The illusion of control through denial. Sacrificing the present for a phantom future. Second error, you torture the present in the name of a hypothetical future that never arrives. This is the mistake of those who live in a permanent state of when. When I have X amount of money saved, then I will live. When I retire, then I will enjoy. When I have security, then I will be happy. The ancient Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, preached control over desires, but there is a dangerously distorted interpretation of this philosophy that has spread through modern culture. The idea that control means total and perpetual denial. Seneca wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it." But he also lived in a luxurious villa, enjoyed good food, and cultivated rich friendships. Why? Because he understood the difference between neurotic attachment and conscious appreciation. Stoicism does not preach absurd voluntary poverty. It preaches psychological freedom from external necessity. Psychologist Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, discovered something fascinating. People who live in constant, delayed gratification without balance develop what he called financial learned helplessness. They become so conditioned to denying themselves that they lose the ability to recognize when it is appropriate and strategic to invest in their quality of life. And here is the cruel paradox. The person who lives in perpetual denial ends up making worse financial decisions in the long run. Why? Because optimal decisions require mental clarity, energy, health, and emotional well-being, all things that deteriorate when you live in constant survival mode. I personally know the story of an accountant named Richard, documented in studies on financial behavior. For 35 years, Richard meticulously saved 40% of his income. He lived in a tiny apartment, drove a 20-year-old car, never traveled, refused social invitations to avoid spending, ate basic meals. His plan? To retire at 60 with complete financial freedom. Finally, at 60, Richard had $2.3 million saved, financial freedom achieved. And then, 3 months after retiring, Richard suffered a massive stroke. Doctors attributed the event to decades of chronic stress, poor nutrition, social isolation, and lack of adequate physical activity, all direct consequences of his ultra-frugal lifestyle. At 62, Richard was in a wheelchair with limited cognitive abilities, spending $8,000 a month on health care. He had the money, but he had irreversibly sacrificed the health and vitality needed to enjoy it. His savings, ironically, were now being consumed not by pleasure or fulfillment, but by medicine and nurses. Today, I see this manifested in subtle but devastating ways. The professional who doesn't invest in a proper work environment, developing chronic back problems. The entrepreneur who works 16-hour days eating fast food to save time and money, systematically destroying their metabolic health. The great illusion is this: you think you are saving money. In reality, you are transferring costs. The money you don't spend on quality of life today will be spent, multiplied on health treatments tomorrow. The opportunity you don't seize at 30 due to lack of resources would have been 10 times more accessible than it will be at 50. The relationship you neglect because you are always busy saving for the future won't be there when you finally have time. Implement what I call the vitality budget. Set aside 15% of your income exclusively for investments in present quality of life that preserve your future potential. Preventive health, quality food, adequate rest, experiences that renew your creative energy. This is not frivolous spending. It is an investment in your most important asset, yourself. A sick and exhausted entrepreneur does not make good decisions. A chronically stressed professional does not perform optimally. You cannot drive a car without ever doing maintenance and expect it to go far. The same applies to your body and mind. Second practice, the 1% experience rule. Every month, spend 1% of your net income on an experience that measurably enriches your life. Learning something new, meeting someone interesting, visiting a significant place. This 1% is your insurance against the unlived life. Error number 3. The identity trap. When being frugal becomes your prison. Third error, you turn frugality into a central identity, and identity is the hardest prison to escape. When being frugal stops being a strategy and becomes who you are, you unconsciously sabotage any opportunity that threatens that self-image. Jung spoke of identification with the persona, when we mistake the social mask we wear for our true nature. When your identity is deeply intertwined with being the frugal person, your unconscious ego will filter and reject opportunities that contradict that narrative. Psychologist Robert Cialdini documented the principle of consistency. Once we publicly commit to an identity, our brain will perform extraordinary mental gymnastics to maintain that consistency, even against our own best interests. Here is the trap. Someone approaches you with a genuine business opportunity that requires an initial investment of $5,000 with a potential return of $50,000. But you don't analyze the opportunity on its merits. Your brain automatically rejects it because people like me don't do that. I'm frugal. I don't take risks. I don't spend. Your identity just cost you a potential $45,000. Nietzsche warned about becoming a slave to your own virtues. When a positive quality, frugality for example, becomes so central to your sense of self that you cannot flex it contextually, it ceases to be a virtue and becomes a vice. In Greek mythology, there is the story of King Midas, but let me tell the lesser-known version. Everyone knows the part where he wishes that everything he touches turns to gold, but what few analyze is why Midas made this request. Midas was known in his kingdom as the accumulator king. His identity was deeply tied to being the man who accumulated more wealth than any other. When Dionysus offered him any wish, Midas didn't think of power, wisdom, or immortality. He thought only of more accumulation, because that's what his identity demanded. The result? He turned his food to gold and starved. He turned water to gold and died of thirst. He touched his daughter in an embrace, and she became a golden statue. Midas had more wealth than he could count, but he had lost everything that made life worth living. The Midas curse was not the golden touch. It was his inability to act outside of his identity, even when that identity became his destruction. He couldn't stop accumulating because accumulator was who he was. Today, this manifests in more subtle but equally destructive ways. I know professionals who refuse promotions because the new role would require spending more on appropriate clothes. And this conflicts with their identity as a simple person. They choose career stagnation to preserve their self-image. I see entrepreneurs who sabotage their own growth because expanding would require spending on marketing or hiring people. And their identity is the entrepreneur who does everything alone and spends little. They prefer small, controlled businesses to real abundance. The most tragic part? Often these people don't even realize what they are doing. They will rationalize their choices with seemingly solid logic. But the real reason is subconscious. Accepting the opportunity would mean betraying who they believe they are. First, do the identity separation exercise. Complete this sentence 10 times. I am a person who... How many of those sentences involve saving, frugality, or not spending? If more than 3 out of 10 are related to financial habits, you have likely turned strategy into identity. Second, reframe your narrative. Instead of, I am a frugal person, try, I am a person who makes strategic financial choices based on context. The difference is subtle but powerful. The first is rigid and binary. The second is flexible and situational. Third, practice strategic inconsistency. Once a month, deliberately do something that contradicts your usual financial identity. If you always buy the cheapest, occasionally buy the premium and analyze if there is real value in the difference. If you never invest in yourself, do it once and observe the results. The goal is not to abandon frugality, but to prove to your brain that your identity is more fluid than you imagine. Error number 4, performative saving. Spending emotional energy on pennies while dollars escape. Fourth error, you spend 3 hours researching to save $5 on a purchase, but you don't even analyze where the $500 in monthly automatic expenses are going. This is the error of performative saving, optimizing irrelevant micro-decisions while ignoring the macro patterns that truly determine your financial destiny. Behavioral economists call this the small cost fallacy, our natural inability to correctly process proportions when it comes to money. The human brain did not evolve to handle complex mathematical abstractions. It evolved in a hunter-gatherer environment where every small resource mattered equally. Parkinson, the British naval historian, formulated a fascinating law about bureaucracies that applies perfectly here. Time spent on any agenda item will be in inverse proportion to the sum involved. In other words, boards argue for hours about buying office pens but approve multi-million-dollar budgets in minutes. Why? Because everyone understands pens. Few understand complex finance. The result? Disproportionate effort is invested in low-impact decisions, while truly significant decisions receive superficial scrutiny. Daniel Kahneman, winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics, demonstrated that we have two systems of thinking, one fast and intuitive, the other slow and analytical. The problem? The slow system consumes a lot of cognitive energy, so we reserve it for decisions that seem important, even if they aren't. And we use the fast system for decisions that seem trivial, even if they determine our future. During World War II, the British Royal Air Force faced a problem. Their bombers were being shot down in alarming numbers. Where to reinforce the armor? The planes that returned had damage concentrated on the wings and fuselage. The obvious answer would be to reinforce those areas. But a Hungarian statistician named Abraham Wald saw what everyone else was ignoring. He said, "You are looking at the wrong planes." The planes that returned survived despite the damage to the wings. The planes that were shot down were hit in different places, the engine and the cockpit, and that's why they never came back to be counted. The mistake was focusing on the visible and ignoring the critical invisible. The RAF was about to spend resources reinforcing the least important parts, while the real vulnerabilities remained unprotected. This story perfectly illustrates the error of performative saving. People spend absurd energy optimizing what is visible and easy to measure. Coupons, promotions, generic brands, while completely ignoring the real holes in their finances. Forgotten subscriptions, negative compound interest, unexplored income opportunities, asset depreciation, hidden time costs. I see this constantly in the modern world. The person who spends 30 minutes looking for the cheapest parking to save $3, but has never analyzed that their car depreciates $500 monthly. The professional who switches cell phone providers 3 times to save $20 a month, but has remained in a job that pays them 30% below market for 5 years. The most insidious part? Performative saving not only fails to generate real wealth, it actively consumes the most scarce resource you possess: cognitive attention. Every minute spent comparing prices of toilet paper is a minute not invested in developing valuable skills, building strategic relationships, or identifying real financial growth opportunities. There is a concept in economics called opportunity cost. What you fail to gain when you choose one option over another. The tragedy of performative saving is that its opportunity cost is devastating but completely invisible. You feel virtuous saving pennies while your potential earning capacity atrophies from neglect. First, do the proportion audit. List all your recurring monthly expenses. Now list how much time you actively spend trying to optimize each one. You will likely discover that you spend 80% of your time optimizing 20% of your expenses and completely ignore the 80% that truly matter. Apply the 80-20 rule. Identify the 20% of financial decisions that determine 80% of your results. For most people, this means 1. Your career and income-generating ability. 2. Your housing and transportation. 3. Your debts and investments. 4. Your health. Spend 80% of your optimization energy in these 4 domains. The other 80% of expenses, automate, simplify, or accept good enough and free your mind for what really matters. Second, calculate your hourly attention cost. Divide your monthly income by the number of hours you are awake in the month. This is the minimum value of your attention time. Now, before spending 2 hours to save $10, ask yourself, could these 2 hours generate more than $10 if invested in something that increases my earning capacity? The answer is almost always yes. Pause for a moment. Breathe. Let the weight of these revelations settle into your consciousness. Thus far, we have established the fundamental pillars of the illusion. You have learned that what we call financial self-control is often pathology disguised as virtue, that saving out of fear is not strategy. It is paralysis, that sacrificing the present for a phantom future is to steal from both, that turning frugality into an identity creates a psychological prison, that focusing on pennies while dollars escape is the guaranteed path to staying small. But these 4 errors are, in essence, defensive. They are the passive ways in which we sabotage ourselves. They are the errors of omission, what we fail to do, to risk, to invest. Now, we enter darker territory. The 5th error is not passive. It is active. It is insidious. It is the sum of all the previous ones manifested in a single toxic belief that contaminates every financial decision you make. This belief is so deeply ingrained in our cultural conditioning that challenging it will at first seem like heresy. The knowledge you are about to receive is not for those who seek comfort in their current beliefs. It is for those brave enough to confront the possibility that everything they were taught about money, security, and success might be fundamentally wrong. Prepare yourself, because the last error is the most dangerous of all. Error number 5, the great lie of security, saving as a shield against a world that no longer exists. 5th and most devastating error. You have built your entire financial strategy based on a model of the world that died decades ago. You save for security in an economy that no longer rewards security, but systematically punishes those who seek it through traditional methods. Nassim Taleb, the mathematician and philosopher of risk, introduced the concept of fragility versus anti-fragility. A fragile system breaks under stress. A robust system withstands stress. But an anti-fragile system improves with stress, volatility, and uncertainty. The traditional model of financial security, saving money in low-risk accounts, avoiding debt, seeking a stable job, was appropriate for a specific era, the post-World War II period until approximately the year 2000, an era of controlled inflation, guaranteed pensions, lifelong jobs, and savings returns that outpaced inflation. That era is over, but the mental programming remains. We currently live in an economy characterized by inflation that erodes savings faster than interest can accumulate it, employers who see employees as disposable human resources, pensions that have become extinct, governments with unsustainable debts, and technological transformations that make skills obsolete in months, not decades. In this new environment, the traditional strategy of saving for security not only fails to generate security, it actively creates vulnerability. Why? Because while you are saving linearly, the world is changing exponentially. Your security is an illusion that deteriorates faster than you can build it. Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. In a world of accelerating change, static strategies are not just ineffective, they are suicidal. But there is something even deeper happening here. The search for security through saving is, fundamentally, a search for control in a universe that is intrinsically uncontrollable. It is a psychological defense mechanism against existential anxiety. Ernest Becker, in his masterpiece The Denial of Death, argued that all human civilization is essentially an elaborate system of mortality denial. We build empires, accumulate wealth, establish legacies, all to create the illusion of permanence in a world of total impermanence. Compulsively saving for an uncertain future is a modern form of this denial. It is the implicit belief that if you just accumulate enough money, you will be safe, not just financially, but existentially. That you will have controlled the uncontrollable. But here is the brutal truth that few have the courage to confront. No matter how much money you save, you cannot buy immunity from chaos. Economies collapse. Currencies inflate. Banks fail. Governments change rules. Technologies destroy entire industries overnight. And we all eventually die. Absolute security is an illusion. It always has been. The only real security lies not in accumulation, but in adaptability, not in control, but in resilience, not in avoiding risk, but in developing the capacity to navigate risk intelligently. Let me tell two parallel stories of two men who lived through the same economic crisis, the Great Recession of 2008, with opposing philosophies. The first, let's call him Thomas, was a mid-level manager at a large corporation. For 20 years, he had saved meticulously. He lived below his means, had 6 months of expenses in an emergency account, and avoided debt like the plague. His retirement plan was on track. Thomas was the embodiment of traditional security. When 2008 arrived, Thomas lost his job. But he had his savings, so he felt prepared. The problem? The job market in his industry collapsed. He applied for hundreds of positions, but his skills were too specific, too old. For 2 years, Thomas burned through his savings while looking for a job that no longer existed. At 52, he accepted a position that paid 40% less than his previous salary. Thomas had done everything right according to the traditional manual, and yet he was devastated. Why? Because he had built security on a single pillar, saved money, while completely neglecting adaptability, his network, skill diversification, and the ability to generate value in new environments. Now, the second man. Let's call him Marcus. Marcus was a tech freelancer. He had no significant savings. All the money he earned was reinvested in learning new skills, building personal projects, and expanding his professional network. He had strategic debts from courses and tools. By traditional standards, Marcus was financially irresponsible. When 2008 arrived, Marcus also lost clients. But here's the difference. Marcus had invested in himself as an adaptable asset. He had 10 different potential income streams. He had a network of 500 people who knew his work. He had skills in 3 different areas and the ability to learn new ones quickly. Within 3 months, Marcus had pivoted to a new emerging niche, social media consulting, something that barely existed before the crisis. Within 18 months, he was earning 3 times more than before the recession. Not because he had money saved, because he had invested in becoming anti-fragile. 10 years later, Thomas has still not recovered his pre-2008 standard of living. He is closer to retirement, but with fewer resources than he planned. Marcus, on the other hand, sold his consulting company for $7 million in 2015. The difference was not luck. It was fundamental philosophy. Thomas sought security through defensive accumulation. Marcus built security through offensive adaptability. Today, this dynamic has accelerated exponentially. Artificial intelligence is making entire professions obsolete. Automation is eliminating jobs by the millions. Globalization means you compete with the entire world. Pandemics can shut down economies overnight. Inflation can devalue decades of savings in years. In this environment, The save and wait strategy is not prudence. It is suicidal negligence. It's like building a paper fortress while a hurricane approaches. You feel safe because you are doing something, but the action itself is fundamentally inadequate for the real threat. I see this everywhere. The professional who saves religiously but never invests in updating their skills, becoming progressively less employable each year. The entrepreneur who accumulates capital in a checking account but never invests in marketing or innovation, watching their business wither as their savings grow. The cruel paradox is this: the more you seek security through traditional methods in a non-traditional world, the less secure you become. Your defensive strategy is, in fact, self-sabotage in slow motion. But there is an even more insidious dimension to this illusion. While you are saving, believing you are building security, invisible forces are systematically stealing the value you believe you are preserving. Inflation is the most obvious. In Brazil, for example, $100,000 saved in 2015 has the purchasing power equivalent to approximately $60,000 in 2025. You kept the money, but you lost 40% of its real value. Your security was a mirage that disappeared while you watched. But inflation is just the tip of the iceberg. There is also compounded opportunity cost. While you kept that $100,000 safe in a savings account earning 2% a year, someone who invested in developing a valuable skill multiplied their income 10 times. Someone who invested in a small business built an asset that generates $10,000 a month passively. Someone who invested in assets that appreciate with inflation not only preserved, but expanded their wealth. The difference, after a decade, the person who saved safely has perhaps $120,000 nominal, with the purchasing power of $70,000 from 2015. The person who invested in generative assets has multiple income streams totaling $50,000 to $100,000 monthly. The distance between the two trajectories is astronomical, and it was created by the illusion of security. This is the slow poison of the traditional strategy. You don't realize you are losing because the nominal numbers in your account increase. But in terms of real freedom, real purchasing power, real opportunities, you are regressing year after year. But let me take you even deeper. Why, knowing all this, do people still cling desperately to the traditional save for security strategy? The answer lies in the psychology of fear and the illusion of control. Saving is tangible. You can see the numbers grow. You can check your bank balance and feel a small dose of dopamine. It is concrete, measurable, seemingly safe. Investing in yourself is abstract. Developing a skill doesn't immediately show up in any balance. Building a network of relationships doesn't have a measurable short-term ROI. Creating an asset takes time before it generates a return. And during that time, you are vulnerable, exposed, uncertain. The human brain, shaped by millions of years of evolution in environments of immediate scarcity, prefers the tangible and immediate over the abstract and future. It prefers the illusion of control over the reality of uncertainty. But here is the truth that separates those who thrive from those who merely survive. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is appropriate action despite fear. Real security comes not from avoiding risk, but from developing competence in navigating risk. The Stoics had an exercise called premeditatio malorum, the visualization of adversity. Marcus Aurelius regularly imagined losing everything: power, wealth, health. Why? Not for masochism, but to develop psychological resilience, to remind himself that true security resides not in what you own, but in who you are. If you lost all your money tomorrow, who would you be? What value could you still create? What problems could you still solve? What relationships would you still maintain? If your answers to these questions are nobody, none, none, and none, then you have no security at all. No matter how much money you have saved, you have only the temporary illusion of security that can be destroyed by any one of 1,000 unpredictable events. How to escape this final trap? Through a fundamental reorientation of what financial security means. First practice: the triple security rule. Divide your concept of security into three independent pillars, each representing approximately one-third of your attention and resources. Pillar 1, liquid capital. Yes, keep an emergency reserve, but not 6 months of expenses. 3 months is sufficient as a buffer against immediate unforeseen events. More than that, and you are sacrificing growth for paranoia. Pillar 2, human capital. Invest aggressively in becoming more valuable. Rare and valuable skills, deep knowledge, recognized credentials, the ability to create value in multiple contexts. This is your true life insurance. Pillar 3, social capital. A network of genuine relationships with competent and well-positioned people. A solid reputation, presence in relevant communities. When crises come, it is people, not money, who most often solve real problems. If one pillar fails, the other two support you. This is real security. Saving only. Money is betting all your security on a single, fragile pillar. Second practice, the quarterly anti-fragile audit. Every 3 months, ask these brutally honest questions. If my industry profession collapsed tomorrow, how long would it take me to be generating equivalent income in a different field? If the answer is more than 6 months, you are dangerously fragile. How many potential income streams do I possess? If the answer is 1, your job, you are at catastrophic risk. In the last 3 months, did I invest more in accumulating money or in increasing my ability to generate money? If you invested more in accumulation, you are building false security. If I lost access to all my saved money for 90 days, would I survive and thrive based on my skills, relationships, and alternative resources? If not, your savings are crutches, not security. Third practice, the options portfolio. Instead of saving passive money, build an options portfolio. Small strategic investments in multiple possibilities. A side project that, if successful, could become a main business. A skill being developed that opens doors to a new career. An investment in relationships with potential mentors or partners. A small position in assets that appreciate during crises. Gold, Bitcoin, emergency skills. Low-cost experiments in emerging areas with high potential. Each of these is a call option on your future. Most will not pay off, but the ones that do can change your trajectory completely. This is the portfolio of anti-fragility. Fourth practice, the voluntary deprivation test. Once a quarter, deliberately live on 30% of your normal income for 1 week, not as punishment, but as training. You are practicing resilience, proving to yourself that your quality of life, identity, and ability to be happy are not as dependent on material comfort as you fear. This exercise has 2 powerful effects. First, it eliminates the paralyzing fear of not having enough that fuels compulsive saving. Second, it reveals how much of your usual spending is truly necessary versus unconscious habit. Freedom comes not from having much, but from needing little. Notice the common pattern in all 5 errors we have explored. Error 1. Saving out of fear instead of strategy puts you in permanent defensive mode. Error 2. Sacrificing the present for a phantom future robs both timelines. Error 3. Turning frugality into identity creates a psychological prison. Error 4. Optimizing pennies while ignoring dollars wastes your scarcest resource, attention. Error 5. Seeking security through accumulation in a rapidly changing world builds castles in the sand. What do they all have in common? They are strategies from an old world applied to a new reality. They are obsolete maps for a territory that no longer exists. And using the wrong map not only fails to get you to your destination, it actively ensures you get lost. The inconvenient truth is this: misdirected self-control is not a virtue. It is a vice. Frugality without strategic purpose is not wisdom. It is masked cowardice. Saving that does not serve growth is not prudence. It is self-imprisonment. So what to do? How to rebuild your relationship with money, security, and self-control in terms that actually serve your prosperity? The answer is not to abandon self-control. It is to redirect it. It is not to spend irresponsibly. It is to invest strategically. It is not to accept stupid risk. It is to develop competence in navigating intelligent risk. First, redefine the very concept of financial self-control. Real self-control is not the ability to deny yourself indefinitely. It is the ability to act in alignment with your deep values and long-term goals, even when short-term impulses suggest easier paths. This means saying no to impulsive purchases that add no real value to your life, but it also means saying yes to investments that, while expensive or scary now, will multiply your future potential. The self-control of the poor says no to everything out of fear. The self-control of the prosperous says no to the irrelevant and yes to the transformational. Second, accept the death of traditional security. Allow yourself to grieve. The golden age of guaranteed security is dead. Lifelong jobs, reliable pensions, savings that beat inflation, these things are not coming back. Stopping the mourning for them and starting to adapt to the new reality is the first step to prosperity. In a world of accelerating change, the only real security comes from three sources: adaptable skills, genuine relationships, and an anti-fragile mindset. Everything else is a comfortable illusion that will be violently shattered when the next crisis comes, and it will come. Third, implement what I call the triple budget. Divide your net income into three categories, not according to traditional spreadsheets, but according to strategic function. 30% foundation, essential expenses, basic emergency buffer, non-negotiable obligations. This is your floor. 30% multiplication, direct investments in human, social, and financial capital growth. Education, tools, networking, income-generating assets, strategic experiments. This is your engine. 40% freedom, present quality of life, meaningful experiences, preventive health, time with important people. This is your purpose. Yes, you read that correctly. More for freedom than for foundation. Why? Because a life not lived is not a life saved for later. It is a life wasted forever. Fourth, develop what the military calls adaptive planning. The military doesn't make rigid plans. They make commander's intent, clear objectives with multiple paths to achieve them. When one path is blocked, they pivot immediately to an alternative. Apply this to your finances. Instead of, I will save X for retirement in 30 years, try my intent is to have financial freedom. Possible paths: build a scalable business, develop premium skills that command high value, create multiple passive income streams, build a network that opens extraordinary doors. Then, pursue all of them simultaneously on a small scale and double down on the ones that show traction. This is anti-fragile planning. It doesn't put all its eggs in one basket. It creates multiple asymmetrical bets where the downside is limited, but the upside is exponential. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. The path I am describing is harder in the short term. It is more uncomfortable. It requires courage to invest in yourself when you could be safely hoarding cash. It requires humility to admit that old strategies no longer work. It requires discipline to develop skills when it would be easier to watch Netflix. But here is the question you need to answer honestly. Do you prefer short-term comfort that guarantees long-term mediocrity, or short-term discomfort that enables long-term exceptionalism? Because that is really the choice. There is no comfortable path to exceptional prosperity in a world of accelerating change. There is only the illusion of comfort that reveals itself as a nightmare over the decades. The 5 errors we explored are not just financial errors. They are existential errors. They are ways of betraying your potential in the name of a security that was never real. Compulsive saving out of fear? It is living as if you were already dead. Sacrificing the present for a phantom future? It is ensuring that both are wasted. Turning frugality into identity? It is choosing the prison of consistency over the freedom of evolution. Optimizing pennies while dollars escape? It is playing at being in control while your destiny slips away. Seeking security through accumulation in a volatile world? It is building fortresses against wars that are no longer fought that way. So here is my final challenge to you. In the next 24 hours, identify one thing, just one, that you have been avoiding because of not having money or it being an unnecessary expense, but that you know deep down would transform your ability to create value in the world. It could be a course, a mentor, a tool, an investment in your health, a strategic trip, a calculated risk on a new project. And then commit, not tomorrow, not when I have more security, now. Because every day you postpone investing in your growth is a day you guarantee you will remain exactly where you are. The difference between those who save to remain poor and those who invest to become prosperous is not in the numbers in their bank account. It is in the courage to act in alignment with the reality of the world as it is, not as we wish it were. Benjamin Franklin, the same man who said, "A penny saved is a penny earned," also wrote something few, quote, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." And Seneca, the Stoic who preached control over desires, ended one of his most famous letters with these words: "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Time is passing, the world is changing, and you have a choice to make. Will you continue saving your way to mediocrity, or will you invest your way to exceptionalism? The choice, as always, is yours. But now, at least, you know it is a choice, and knowledge without action is not wisdom. It is just wasted information. Thank you for having the courage to reach the end of this journey. If this content challenged your beliefs and provoked discomfort, excellent. Discomfort is the first sign that you are truly learning. Now go and do something with it.